Hello everyone, please let me know through the chat if you're unable to see my screen or if you're unable to hear this, which is probably not going to happen. Let me write that in there. Let me know if you Oh, perfect. Everybody can hear.
Your sound works perfect. Yeah, great.
Everybody can hear.
Let's get this party started.
Oh, okay. Should we get started?
Hold on. Allison, are you able to hear us yet? See that she has a no. There we go. Great.
Perfect. So we do have representatives from a lot of LEAs, and I'm just very excited to get started. Technical difficulties, ladies. I can't move this one. So welcome. My name is Laura Montes, and here I have in the room
Shandy Wagner. Tanya Lovelace.
So I manage the Staffing Data Collaborative. Shandy and Tanya are members of the Division of Data Assessment and
Research.
Research. And I, as my title says, I am part of the Division of Teaching and Learning. And during this year, we're working together to get better staff data collected for the agency. So during this webinar, we will be reviewing the following: the Faculty and Staff Technical Guide and the Faculty and Staff Collection Template. Our goal is to make sure that you have the resources and tools you need to complete the collection in a timely manner. So we have a lot of LEAs right now on the call, and some LEAs are part of the Staffing Data Collaborative, and we have other LEAs that are not. What we've decided this year is to join efforts because there is no difference in the data that OSSI receives from the Staffing Data Collaborative members and from the members from the non-staffing data collaborative members. The only big difference is how you give the data to OSSI. So staffing data collaborative members give the data directly to our research vendor that then aggregates information. They also receive the TNCP Insight Survey for free, and they receive reports back. During this year, we've incorporated educator preparation programs that will also be receiving aggregate information, and staffing data collaborative members will have an opportunity to collaborate with them. Non-staffing data collaborative members give OSSI the data directly. So that is the big difference. Oh, something else that I didn't mention. If you have any questions while we are talking, please let us know and we will try to answer them either through the chat or using voice. And if we don't have the answer during our conversation today, we will post those questions and answers online so everybody can also get a chance to listen to them. So how did we come up with the Staffing Data Collaborative? We came up with it in 2014 as a result of the U.S. Department of Ed's launch to the Excellent Educators for All initiative. As part of this, every state education agency had to submit a plan that ensures that their low-income and minority students were not taught at a higher rate by ineffective, out-of-field, or novice teachers. So OSSI decided that one of their key strategies was to help LEAs and enable them to have the actual insights to understand and create their own policies. So that is the purpose of the Staffing Data Collaborative. If you are not part of the collaborative and after this presentation you would like to join, just shoot me a message and look for my information on that link. And I'll give you my information later on, too.
Great. So the faculty staff collection for 2018-19, we are combining two collections. Last year we had the teacher shortage report and the faculty staff collection. We are combining that into one collection, which is why timeliness is really important. That teacher shortage data has to go out the door still to the federal government, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But that does have to go out the door in December, so we absolutely have to get data from everyone on time. But the single collection satisfies the following requirements. We have the TNTP Insight Survey roster, and so that is for those surveys to go out for the members of the Staffing Data Collaborative. That is not something that non-collaborative members participate in or receive or have to provide emails for. As I mentioned before, we have the Teacher Shortage Areas Report, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We have a lot of EdFacts reporting that we use for the faculty and staff data for. We have to report just how many full-time equivalent positions you have, and that's for everything from teachers to cafeteria workers to LEA admin. We have teacher qualifications, which is part of the new ESSA requirements. We also provide certification and licensing information for teachers of English learners, teachers of students with disabilities, paraprofessionals who work with students with disabilities, and the support staff who work with students with disabilities. We also use this data for the teacher equity calculations, which is required under Title I, Part A of ESSA. And then finally, as you all are probably well aware, the ESSA school report cards, which will come out for the first time in December of this year, we use this faculty staff data to report on teacher experience for all of our LEAs, and those are put into buckets of how many years of experience your teachers have, and that's a percentage. And then also teacher qualifications, which only applies to DCPS. And so we do report on teachers who are certified and teachers who are in field. But again, those are only for DC public schools, DCPS schools only. So we do a lot of federal reporting and meet a lot of federal requirements with this data. Minor technical difficulty. There we go. So there are slightly different deadlines this year. You will all receive the data submitted back to you that you gave us in 17-18, so you're not starting from scratch. Staffing Data Collaborative members already have those templates to move forward with. You should have already received those. The due date is October 31st, and you will submit that through the TNTP FTP site, just like you did last year. If you're a non-Staffing Data Collaborative member, you will receive your data by October 8th, and so we do apologize that you don't have the template sitting in front of you for this webinar, but you will be receiving it soon, as well as the technical guide. Those are due a little bit later than the Staffing Data Collaborative since you're getting it later, and so that's due November 16th, and you'll submit through QuickBase once again this year. It's the same application that we used last year. That being said, the template is very similar to last year. There are changes. You definitely need to use the 18-19 template. But if you wanted to start thinking about it, you could look at last year's template. It won't be drastically different. And you'll see all the data fields that are available in this webinar today. So the 2018-19 faculty and staff data collection template is organized into quite a few sections because we do have a lot of different types of reporting that we have to do. And we are going to go through each of those sections in this webinar. So hold on, I know you're all very excited, but we definitely want to make sure that we're getting accurate data. We are, like, if you just noticed the first bullet point there, we are asking for vacancy information here this year instead of through the teacher shortage template so that you only have one template to complete. But of course, we move through a lot of different things. It's not required for everyone. Of course, we're not asking for all of your staff to provide teaching curriculum and years of teaching experience. Those things would only apply to teachers, for example. And so we will walk through today what exactly you need to be providing, what fields are required for which types of staff at your school. So the technical guide is organized for each of the sections that were on the previous slide. We talk about who's included for that section. Is it just teachers? Is it teachers and leaders? Is it all of your staff? Who's included? We also talk about the different data elements, what the definition of the data elements are, the permitted values. We have drop downs in the templates. You definitely have to use those drop downs. We process data for almost 15,000 faculty and staff across the state. So it's really important that as a data processing issue that you are submitting the data in the format that we've requested and that we've put into the template. And then we also include information on how the data elements will be used for which, not necessarily for which EdFacts reports, but are they used for EdFacts, are they used for report cards, et cetera. And then we also have a frequently asked questions. So if you have a question about, how do I include this one teacher or this one faculty person that seems like kind of an odd case, please check the FAQs first to see if that question has already been answered. And if you still have questions, obviously, clearly reach out to Laura or myself.
So who should be included in this collection? And this is extremely important. It is not only teachers. This collection should include all instructional staff, all administrators, all support staff. Basically, everybody that works in your building should be included in the collection. The folks that are long-term substitute teachers, so anyone that has been a substitute for over 4 weeks as of October 5th should be included. That also includes any contracting staff that are part of the regular operations of your school. So that might be a bus driver, a nurse, a psychologist, physical therapist, speech pathologist, you name it, those folks need to be included in the collection. Any staff or employee entity that is part of the regular operations of your LEA or school needs to be included. And one folks that do come to mind are employees of charter operators that are part of your school's regular operations need to be included in this reporting. So a little background for me, I used to work for a charter operator, and I expect that my name would have been included in this roster, because the work that I did was part of the regular operations of that school and LEA. But who do we not include? So don't include any short-term substitute teachers, anyone that has not been in your building or does not have a position for over 4 weeks. Any contractors that are not part of the regular service. And that could be, not. So cafeteria workers, you should include them, but you shouldn't include someone that just drops off the lunches for your building, let's say once a week or twice a week, because that's not part of your everyday work. This might raise some questions, so if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat or in the questions bar. And like I said before, we'll start answering things as needed. So here are some tips. I know that most folks that registered for this webinar have submitted staff data in the past. But please note that this is just some information that can help you be successful and not have your submission rejected. So if you have a staff member that serves in multiple schools or serves multiple roles or multiple grade spans, that person needs to be represented in multiple rows of your spreadsheet. So what does that mean? So let's say you have a teacher that is also, also has serves as the reading specialist for your school. That person also needs to be included actually twice. If you have, let's say, a physical education teacher that services, let's say, I don't know, your sixth grade, because that's part of the middle school, and let's say part of your high school grades, that person, because of the grade spans, needs to be included twice for that role. And then you would identify the appropriate time that that individual also serves. So if they're part-time at one school and part-time at another school, or just a section of the time, we'll teach you later how to calculate that percentage of time. So we do have a question about this. Okay. So let's say someone is asking about therapists and related service providers. Yes, please include them in your collection. Those folks are extremely important because we have IDEA collection reporting that we have to do that accounts for anyone providing services to our special needs students. So let's say someone else asked, let's say you have a music teacher that teaches 1st through 4th grade. Should they be included 5 times? No. So it all depends on the role. So that person is a teacher, music teacher, and but they serve 1st to 4th grade. It just so happens that 1st to 4th grade is in the elementary school grade span, so that person only needs to be included once. Let me move down the questions.
I've answered them all online as well.
Perfect. So let's start with some basics. Who is a teacher? We determined that this was extremely important because some folks were labeled as teachers that, based on the federal definition of who is a teacher and our state definition of who is a teacher, we could not have them classified as a teacher. So a teacher is anyone defined at this school who instructs any core or non-core academic subjects. And that includes general or special education teachers instructing students in, let's say, English language arts, math, science, social studies, as well as arts, foreign language, physical education, etc. It does not include student teachers, teachers' aide, paraprofessionals, other support staff, speech pathologists, social workers, counselors, librarians. Please do not label these staff members as teachers of your building. We have other federal roles for those staff members, but do not label them as teachers.
Can I also clarify too, if you have someone who teaches after school as kind of a support, and they're doing, I don't know, recreational activities or even tutoring, something like that, if you don't consider them a teacher and they're not part of your core curriculum or part of your core day, they should not be included with the federal role of teacher. They should be included as a student support staff because they work directly with students and they are support staff. So I wanted to clarify that one as well. And your student teachers, like this says, also should not be included.
So I did want to answer a question online that so everybody can also hear this. If you're a teacher that teaches K through 8th grade, how many times should they be listed? So technically, we have secondary that starts in 7th grade, as Shandy wrote. The person should be listed once for elementary and once for secondary, and you'll see as part of the guidance that you'll be able to see, and the template of what grade levels are in each grade span. A colleague here asked, should central office staff be included? Yes, yes, yes. LEA administrators and staff, everybody that's part of your LEA should be included. And my last question that I'll be answering right now, should any city year corps be included? Yes, you should include them as they're part of your regular operations. If this person operates as a teacher, then you can label them as if they're the primary teacher. But if they are just helping out in the building, they should be included as support staff.
Great. So this is new for all LEAs this year. As I mentioned before, we are including the teacher shortage collection as part of this collection. So the very first thing you'll see to the left of your template is a section on vacancies. And so the very first column should be completed for every single staff, or for every single row of data that you're providing to us, to tell us if this is a filled position or if it's a vacant position. Of course, if you have a person in that role and you give us information about Susie Jones, then that position is filled. But if you have a teaching position as of October 5th that you have still not been able to fill, then you need to include information on that position as well. And so you would put vacant in that very first box. And the next box, you'll tell us if it's vacant, what is the reason? And there are some drop downs there. Please choose the most appropriate one. And if this may be a position that's been vacant for a couple of years, maybe you're really struggling to find a physics teacher or a calculus teacher, whatever the case may be, to tell us how many years that position has been vacant. Those second two columns only would need to be filled if the position is vacant. We also need more information about that teaching position, and that comes later across the columns. So if you are submitting information that says you have a vacant teacher position, this only has to be filled out for teaching positions. If you have a vacant cafeteria worker position, we don't need to know about that. It's just for teachers. And so we need you to tell us if it's vacant, why it's vacant, how long it's been vacant. Fill in your LEA and name and code, your school name and code, just like you do for everyone else, so we can see what school is that vacancy at. Put in the title that person would be. So if you need a third grade teacher, you would write third grade teacher in the staff member's title. For the federal role, if it's a third grade teacher, you'd put teacher elementary, or if it's a high school teacher, teacher secondary, just like you would for any of your other teacher roles. Tell us what FTE that is. For most people, that's an FTE of 1. If you just need a part-time teacher, then you would put whatever the appropriate FTE is, whether that's 0.5 or 0.6, or whatever it may be. And then tell us the subject and grade span. That's really important. We have to tell the Department of Education which subjects and which grade spans have those vacancies. And they use that information to determine which teachers can actually qualify for federal student loan forgiveness. So this is really important for our DC teachers, and to make sure that we're trying to attract people to DC, especially if they're looking for that federal loan forgiveness. We want to be able to support them in that, as well as have information about how, as a state agency, we can support our LEAs in trying to recruit teachers to the district.
So we did get a question from someone that asked, what if we offered someone a position and their start date is after October 5th? So that's a vacant position. That position was vacant as of October 5th. So you must report it as a vacant position. Someone asked, when are we having the next webinar? This webinar is currently being recorded, so you can listen to the webinar at any point, obviously between now and the time that your rosters are due. So you can definitely listen to them. We will not be hosting another live webinar. You can, though, and we'll talk about it later, come to some office hours that we will be hosting. So the staff all the sections of this PowerPoint, we will review the specific sections of the spreadsheet, but also some frequently asked questions. So for the staff members' identifiable and demographic information, this information should be included for all of your staff members. So everybody that I mentioned before that needs to be included in the collection should have information completed here. If we do not get information for these columns, note that your rosters will be returned. It is something that we are addressing here as having better data in the agency. The only thing that non-staffing data collaborative members will not be asked are their email addresses. So we ask for email addresses for the TNTP Insight survey, but if you're not a staff LEA that's part of the Staffing Data Collaborative, your template will not have email addresses. Please note, and I've received a lot of questions online and also just to my email asking me, is any of this information federally required? And why would I have to submit my staff member's name or even date of birth, gender, ethnicity? Please note that, we are collecting and the primary purpose of the collection is federally required. But you've noticed that, like I said before, some of this information is not federally required. But as a state agency, we have a larger role. And that's where I really would love for everybody to help us with, to support the talent management and practices within DC. I, as you know, am part of the teaching and learning team and division, and we have a specific role that ensures education preparation for all, providing accreditation, licensure, effectiveness, and support through our professional development offerings. And all of these things we're able to learn just by analyzing the information that we receive. We are able to support the full cycle of teachers and their development. There's a critical issue here in DC in addressing equity, as you all know and we've discussed before. And we really need to understand what is the diversity of the workforce in DC. If we do not receive accurate and information from all of our schools, even though some of this information is not federally required, as the state education agency of DC, we're unable to really put in place the interventions that employ and strengthen the diversity of our teaching staff and the pipelines of our workforce. So, yes, I do understand and I hear that teacher name is not federally required. Date of birth is not federally required. But we need this information to be a better state agency and to be better able to equip DC for the future. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I will, and I'll address a question that was submitted online as well. We are not publishing this data publicly, so teacher names do not go public. That being said, if you are a DCPS employee, it already is public on the DC government website. But for charter LEAs, we are not publishing that information. We don't send it out to even the federal government. We use that information, the names and the date of birth, to match up with our teacher certification database so that we can determine which teachers are certified, and that in aggregate at your school and LEA level gets reported to the federal government. So do be aware of that.
So, yes, so who should be included in this section? All instructional staff, as I mentioned. Who should be excluded? Exclude, and we've noted this so many times already on the webinar, exclude any member of your staff that is not part of the regular operation, and do not include short-term substitute teachers.
Great. So this, we are looking at page 10 to 12 in the Faculty Staff Technical Guide if you already have a copy of that. And remember as well that if a staff member works in multiple schools, they should be included in multiple rows. but the LEA name and code is required for every single person. Obviously, if you're submitting LEA data, then they work for your LEA. The LEA code is provided as well in the drop-downs to make sure that that's correct. The school name and school code should be provided for everyone unless they work at the LEA level. So we know, if you have a larger LEA, you might have a central office where that person is working and they're not assigned to a school. That's fine. Just put NA in the school name and school code for that person. The only caveat there is that if you are listing someone in their federal role as a teacher, they have to be assigned to a school. And so even if they work at multiple schools, that's where you would put them on multiple rows. But if you have a teacher and maybe they're working as a support staff at your LEA office, and so they're working, with all of your schools more as an instructional coach or something like that, then they would be an LEA admin support. They would not be a teacher. So be aware that if you list someone as a teacher, they have to be assigned to a school.
Something else to note here is that let's say your LEA, or let's say the school, services a grade range from kindergarten through 5th grade. We expect to see teachers for all and every single grade. So don't not report a grade level for anything, and we have noticed that in the past.
Yeah.
K through 5 is 2.
Oh, yeah, one other clarification, we'll get to grade levels as well. If you are K through 5, a caveat that kindergarten teachers are listed separately from elementary. Elementary is considered 1st through 5th. And we'll talk in a second about that caveat a little bit more too.
I do have a question. So if someone teaches one class section part-time, so it really honestly depends what class does that person teach, what grade level, what percent. We will talk further about how to report percentage of time, but listen in, because it really depends on what class does this person teach, and what subject, etc.
But you would still include them. If they're teaching one section, they should definitely be included at the appropriate school where they're teaching.
And if this person is a full-time staff, but they're only a teacher for that one section, there should be 2 rows for that staff member. One for the 90% of time that they are doing another role, and then the 10% of time that they are a teacher in whatever the subject area or grade span that they teach. Let's see, and last question for this section right now is, what if a teacher is not assigned to a specific school and they are part of the central office? So if you would have to elaborate a little bit more about that. So if it is a person that's part of central office, you report them as a school of NA. But if it is someone that is teaching, part of the regular operations of the teaching staff, they must have a school. We can talk further about what does this mean, and I can definitely raise this up. But I can't imagine situations where someone is teaching a teacher and not have a specific course. There might be a support staff member. You might be able to report them as that.
Yeah, most likely I think they'll end up as support staff.
Yeah.
And this is not a requirement we're putting in. This is a federal government requirement. We cannot report teachers that are not assigned to a school. So yeah, we can, and if I know we have LEAs that have kind of different situations here and there, so we can definitely talk offline.
Yeah.
And so if, I've seen several questions. If you have teachers who teach at multiple schools, so maybe one teacher teaches art at 3 schools, for example, you would need to list that teacher 3 times, so just copy and paste their other information, put in the school that they're at, so that you would put 1 row for each of those schools, and then put, maybe 0.33 FTE at each of those schools at each of those schools if their time is split between schools. So, you know, if they are teaching in multiple schools, they should be listed at multiple schools. And then what we will do is we say, okay, we see this person's at 3 schools, we roll them all up. If we add their FTEs together, we see they're a full-time person, but they're split equally between those 3 schools.
Another thing big to note is that now that we're, you know, becoming more digital, we do have some LEAs that have, you know, campuses that are, online. The staff members that are part of that online campus need to be reported. We have an obligation as we have an obligation as the state to know and ensure that all students are being educated. And if the students are educated by an online class, that online school should have teachers assigned to them. And as a result, we need them part of the roster.
Yeah, and my advice to you on that too is, you know, instead of typing in their information 4 times if they're at 4 schools, type all their other information in first, then copy and paste for the other 3 lines, and then fill in the different school and make sure that the role is the correct one and the FTEs make sense. I'm the one who processes all this data that you send to us. And so I have seen where people say, oh, this person works full-time at this school and full-time at school B and full-time at school C. And I'm like, I don't think the person has 3 full-time jobs. So do make sure you're updating the FTE to make sure that person's FTE is correctly noted, how much time they're spending at each of those schools. So we've talked a lot about this. We've talked about the main office, if they're at more than 1 LEA. So we know that some of our related service providers, your speech language pathologists, physical therapists, et cetera, may work at multiple LEAs, teachers as well. I mean, this could apply to anyone. Each LEA should report the percentage of time that they spend at that LEA. So if this person works 20 hours out of a 40-hour week at your LEA, then you should put them as 0.5 FTE and let the other LEA worry about that person at, you know, the other LEA. And we've talked about serving multiple schools as well.
So this is new. This is a new section for non-staffing data collaborative members. And what we're doing here is we're capturing returning staff. So for this section, this needs to be completed for all staff members. As you know, you will either have received staffing data collaborative members, receive them on Monday. Their rosters that were submitted last year. But if you're not part of the staffing data collaborative, you will be receiving the rosters that you submitted last year back. And for this section, the only thing you have to do is look at the drop downs and say if this person is a returning staff, if they're a new staff, if they left your LEA, if they transferred to a different school, the date and the reason of their transfer. We're trying to capture here why are our staff leaving DC schools. Yeah, so I think I captured that. Oh, what if an LEA is new? And we do have 3 new LEAs this year. If the LEA is new, just mark new employee for everyone. And you're obviously not receiving your roster from last year because you were not in operation last year. If someone transferred, and I just went over this, transferred to a different school in your LEA, select transfer. If you are, and this is a little tricky, and we wanted to include questions that, you know, were a little bit more tricky here. If someone is a part-time employee in 2 schools in your LEA, what should you mark? So let's say that staff member was a full-time employee and they transferred to be part-time at one school and then got another job at another one of your schools in your LEA, mark them as returning for the school that they are returning in, and mark them as transferred for the school that they have reduced their, you know, like that they are now working in, if they reduce their hours, etc. Let me see if there are any other questions about this. No. Okay, everybody's clear about that.
Great. So the role and FTE percentage, we've kind of hinted at this already. Of course, everything's interrelated. And so for this is really important that you pay close attention to, because this is where we see kind of the messiest data. And so you can put in the staff member's title whatever you actually call that person. So if you call them a third grade teacher, you can write third grade teacher. If that person, I've seen everything from director of quiet time to principal to cafeteria worker. There's a wider range of titles. You can put whatever you want in that box. However, the federal role, we are limited to specific types of federal roles, and there are clear definitions of what those federal roles include. So as we mentioned before, the person should only have teacher in the title if they're actually meeting the definition of what a teacher is. There's also specificity. In this district, we don't actually have teachers who should be listed as ungraded teachers, because we don't have students who are listed as ungraded. And so if you have a teacher who teaches kindergarten, you should list them as a teacher of kindergarten. If they teach pre-K, they should be teacher pre-K. If they teach 1st through 5th grade, they should be teacher elementary, etc. So please do look at that technical guide. There are a wide list of who should be included as what thing. But please be, like I said, be really careful with this. We've seen things where the person's title says they're a guidance counselor, but the federal role says they're a teacher. So, and I know even we have some schools that kind of operate. I've seen a couple of questions about someone who teaches a lot of grades, both like on the PE and art. They would still be in a grade span. So if you're teaching, PE at an elementary school, then they would be teacher elementary. That being said, we know most elementary schools also have pre-K and K. So you would need to separate that person out and say, okay, they're a PE teacher. They teach pre-K through 5th. And so, maybe 1/5 of their day is spent with pre-K and 1/5 of their day is spent with kindergarten. And then the other 3/5 of their day is spent with 1st through 5th graders. So you would need to separate that out into separate lines. Basically, if your school serves kindergartners, we have to have kindergarten staff assigned to your school, or the Department of Education comes back at us and says, where are your kindergarten teachers? Where are your pre-K teachers? So there will be a lot of staff, probably especially your specials teachers, or teachers who work in multiple schools, who will be listed on multiple lines. Even if, also I will note, if you have a teacher who maybe is a student, serves students with disabilities, and so even if you work, or even on a Montessori type school where you're saying, oh, we don't have grades, that's fine, but in our data system, students are still assigned to grades, and you all have access. Maybe as an HR person you don't, but someone in your school has access to those grades, and so you should still choose the appropriate grade span. Please do not use teacher ungraded. I don't even think it's an option this year. But do be really careful about that federal role, making sure that it matches up with the technical guide. If you have questions about how to include someone, please ping Laura or myself. We're happy to help you figure out which is the most appropriate role for that individual.
So we will be hosting an in-person office hours on October 11th, and we'll chat more about what does that look like later on. And that is a great time for very specific questions to come up, as I will be in a room just answering questions that day. If I just saw 2 questions, one that related to the section that I covered right before. So if someone taught half of the time in middle school and then the other half of the time in high school, but this year they decided that they were only going to be a high school teacher, how do you indicate that? So they are returning for their high school, and they left for that middle school role, and that should have been 2 rows on the spreadsheet. And we can chat further if my explanation doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that being said, even if someone, that will take effect for the leaver and returner status, but as far as what you would list them as for 18-19, their current status, it's wherever they work as of October 5th. And so hopefully, since our data collection is more aligned and right after October 5th, that will be easier to parse out. So you would only list them as that high school role. And then for adult charter schools, there is a teacher adult on there, because we know that adult schools typically don't use grades, there is teacher of adult, and so that is completely fine if you actually list students as being adult students. And those are typically LEAs that don't offer regular high school diplomas.
Another question that just came in, what, are we just adding new information to our spreadsheet? Yeah, that's the idea. You're looking at the information that you submitted last year, making edits, filling in some gaps. We do have some gaps now that we're more in line to, having both groups, Staffing Data Collaborative and Non-Staffing Data Collaborative, know and understand the same data. If you have gaps, fill them in. If someone was missing, put them in. But ideally, what you are doing is just adding new folks into the spreadsheet.
That being said, you will receive a new template. Please do not use the old template. There's a new template. It has additional fields this year. If you're in the Staffing Collaborative, you should have already received that template.
They received it on Monday.
Great. If you are not in the Staffing Collaborative, that will come out next week, or at the latest, October 8th. So we will provide that information back to you. And you may see that there were a few lines of data that got cleaned. The only data point that we really clean is the federal role. If we see something that doesn't align with the title you've provided, we clean that. But otherwise, it's going to be the same information that you provided to us last year, but we will put it into the new template for you as a starting point. So the frequently asked questions on the role in FTE, I think we've talked through quite a bit of this. If I want to make sure and hit on the special education teachers, which is the third bullet point here. How should the LEA report a special education teacher? You would report them based on the grade level served. So if they're serving elementary students or secondary students, you would put them accordingly. You would put special education as the curriculum when we get to that section, which is a little further to the right. And then just put in there as well the FTE for the special education, percentage of time and ages served. And school counselors, similarly, school counselors do get split into elementary and secondary counselors. So if they serve grades 1 through 6, primarily you would put, or even K through 6, you would put an elementary school counselor. There's not a separate designation for like a pre-K or a kindergarten counselor the same way that there is for teachers. And if they serve 7 through 12, you could put them as a secondary counselor. I will say there's a little bit of gray area for 7th and 8th graders. So if you are a pre-K-8 or a K-8 campus, you can include teachers and staff as elementary up through grade 8, but you have to have them as 9th through 12th if they are secondary, and definitely elementary if they're 1st through 5th. If you are adding rows, we had a question come in. If you have existing data and you have new teachers this year, you would just type them in underneath where you currently have them.
Add the rows to existing teachers, existing staff.
Oh, and yeah, so if you have existing staff and you're like, oh, I didn't put them in correctly last year, insert a line or add them again at the bottom, copy and paste that information to make sure that you're updating based on new information and clearer guidelines around that, so that you know where, or you can definitely show that that's correct. There's one other question. The technical guide, if you are a Staffing Data Collaborative, you should have received that on Monday. Again, if you're not Staffing Collaborative, you'll receive that with your template by October 8th. So we apologize it's not out already, but it will be out soon. So other frequently asked questions on role and FTE percentage. If you have admin and admin support staff, and you only have one school in your LEA, because we know we have lots of small LEAs, if you only have a single school in your LEA, and your LEA admin is also the school admin, report that person at the school level. And the reason for that is that it's very strange for us to tell the federal government that a school doesn't have a principal or doesn't have any admin staff, whereas it's less scrutinized who's at the LEA level. So this is true for also LEA admin support staff. So if you've got people who are doing some of those admin roles, report them at the school level if you're single school LEA. Real quick on the clarification, the FTE percentage should be between 0 and 1. Unless you have someone who's literally working more than a full-time position, it should not be more than 1. So, if someone's part-time, you put them as 0.5. That's, of course, on your own definition. So if your regular work week is 35 hours and someone works 10 hours, you would do 10 over 35 to determine what FTE, what decimal point that is. And there's a little bit of an explainer here on that third bullet point. If you're dividing people between two different roles, most teachers, we know that there's additional planning time, and so that's kind of hard to account for, so you can use their teaching time and say, okay, if they teach 6 hours a day and 3 hours of it is as a pre-K teacher and 3 hours is as a first grade teacher, you're going to put them half-time as pre-K teacher and half-time as elementary teacher, so 0.5 FTEs for both. And I know PE teachers, and this is probably similar for art and for music teachers, that you would put them in the appropriate curriculum column and the appropriate grade span, putting them multiple times if they span multiple grade spans. So if you've got someone who teaches 5th grade and teaches high school, you would need to put them on 2 different lines, but they should be reported. All right, so the next section is special education, percentage of time and ages served. And so this should be reported for all of your staff that work specifically with students with disabilities. This is for paraprofessionals who work with your students with disabilities, for teachers, and for support staff, your physical therapists, speech language pathologists, counselors, etc. And this is for anyone who works with students aged 3 to 21 on a full-time or part-time basis. You do not need to list every teacher who happens to have a student with disability in their classroom as having time in this bucket. I was a former teacher. I definitely had students with IEPs in my classroom. I would not have been reported as being a special education teacher because that was not my full-time job. It's only for the staff who specifically work with students with disabilities. And so you'll need to put the amount of time that they work with students ages 3 to 5, as well as how much time they work with students aged 6 to 21. So of those 3 columns that you're seeing on your screen right there, the 2 to the right should add up to the 1 to the left. So if you have a person who spends their full-time day as working with maybe in a resource classroom or working with students with disabilities, you would put a 1.0 in that column to the far left, just the special education FTE. And if that person maybe spends half their day working with 3 to 5-year-olds and half their day working with 6 to 10-year-olds, maybe they're in a pre-K 8 or pre-K 5 campus, then you would put 0.5 for their special education FTE for the 3 to 5-year-olds and 0.5 for the 6 to 21-year-olds. And this is just based on what we have to report federally. We have to tell them how many FTEs of people are working with our students with disabilities under IDEA requirements. Laura, can you go? Do we have a question?
Yeah, we do have a question. So someone asked, they're a charter school that specifically works with special needs students over 21. How do would they put them in the 6 to 21 bucket?
So they would not, if you have someone who's only working with people who are over 21, because those students don't, we don't report on those teachers under IDEA because IDEA cuts off students with disability age limit at 21. You would not report that person as a teacher with students with disabilities. But yeah, that seems like if they are working at least some of their time with people who are up to 21, so if you have 20 and 21-year-olds in the class, then that amount of time would need to be reported in the 6 to 21-year-old bucket.
So you do not need to complete that column, but you do need to complete the FTE column, correct?
You would still complete the FTE column because they're still a teacher of adult students. You just wouldn't, you would put a 0 or leave it blank for the students with disability section. Do think too, if you have someone who is working with pre-K through 5th grade, maybe as a teacher of students with disabilities, if they are working with different age spans, they do still need to be on separate lines. There's a separate, because of the federal role is different. So if you have someone who's working with pre-K, K, and with maybe 1st grade, you would need to have them on 3 separate lines and report their special education FTE accordingly. So again, if a staff member serves students with disabilities exclusively, you would report their special education percentage of time as 1. If a student, as I mentioned before, if you have a teacher who has students with disabilities in their gen ed classroom, their special education percentage of time is 0. And then if you have a staff member who maybe serves half their time in a gen ed class and half their time working with special education students, then you would split their time accordingly. So you could still put, they're an elementary teacher, as an example, and then you would just split up that FTE, or, you know, how much of their time as a special education teacher is the 0.5, or, you know, this example here is a 0.66. So whatever the case may be for that individual. So like I said, we have to report on all of this to the Department of Education, how many FTEs of people we have serving students with disabilities. We have to submit reports for teachers, for paraprofessionals, as well as for related service staff. And then, so the sum, as I mentioned before, the sum of the time that they spend serving 3 to 5 and 6 to 21 should equal whatever their FTE is. So if you have a normal 1.0 full-time person, the 3 to 5 and 6 to 21 columns should add up to the column to the left that was on that previous slide. And then, how do I calculate a staff member's total time spent serving students with disabilities between 3 to 5 and 6 to 21? Again, this is just breaking up how many hours of the day they're working with those groups of students. And, you know, like I said, if you have any questions about specific people that you're trying to work through, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to help you figure out that calculation, because I know sometimes it gets a little hairy. So the next section is very similar, except for it's for students who are English learners. We have the term limited English proficiency. It's still carryover, unfortunately, from what we have to report to the Department of Education, but do know that when we say LEP, or limited English proficiency, we are referring to English learners. And so this section needs to be completed for teachers who work primarily with students 3 to 21 who are English learners on a full-time or part-time basis. It works in the same way as teachers with students with disabilities, except for there's no breakdown between ages. It's just how much time are they spending with English learners. And so I'll actually go, if we can, to the next slide, Laura, to clarify who should be counted as this. So first of all, if you have a program, whether it's through Title III funds, or you have a program that's serving specifically your English learners, and the purpose of that program is to fulfill your obligations to civil rights law, to ESSA, that says we have to provide services to our English learners. If that person is employed for that reason and for that program, they should have their FTE reported under the limited English proficiency column. I feel like a lot of these teachers are getting underreported, and I say that because I work with English learner staff and your ELP points of contact quite a bit. And so I know there are a lot of staff out there, but they are very rarely reported. So if you have someone who is teaching even in a bilingual program, and the point of that bilingual program is to meet the civil rights obligations of serving English learners, even if they're teaching math, but their purpose is to teach bilingually, maybe, you know, it's a Spanish immersion bilingual program, and you've got, or maybe not immersion, but you have a Spanish bilingual program to teach English learners. That's the purpose of the program. They're not getting separate ESL pullout or anything like that. That is the program that you're using to serve your English learners. Those teachers should be reported as LEP FTE. Their full FTE would be included in that LEP FTE. And so I know that, again, this may have a little gray area if you are confused about if, or not sure about if you should put someone in as a LEP FTE, please reach out. But definitely, if you have someone who's teaching ESL, they should, as a teacher, they should definitely have their FTE reported here. And it may not be for all your bilingual programs. If you are teaching Chinese or Hebrew or Swahili, and that's not the purpose of that program is to teach a second language, but it's not to teach students who are English learners how to speak English, then those would not be included. So it's not all bilingual programs, but it is it should include bilingual programs that have the purpose of serving English learners. And again, if you are unsure about yours, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to help clarify.
So we got a couple of questions that all go around the same issue. Related service providers or special education coordinators, how should their full-time equivalency status be reported?
So if you have a related service provider who only works with students with disabilities, which I think is the case for almost, if not all of them, then that person would, if they're a full-time person at your LEA and maybe they're speech-language pathologist, you would put a 1 in the special education FTE for that person because they're spending their whole time working with students with disabilities. And yes, we know that some of their time is spent doing paperwork or planning. That's fine. They're their full FTE is still to serve students with disabilities. If you have a person who is only employed by your LEA, maybe they're only 0.2 FTE. They're not a full-time person. If their whole time at your LEA is spent working with students with disabilities and they're at a 0.2 FTE overall, they would be a 0.2 FTE for the students with disabilities column. That being said, this has to be reported for teachers, paraprofessionals, and for related service providers. If you have someone who's a coordinator or who's an LEA admin, maybe you have a special assistant principal for them or something, you don't need to report anything on that. We are only reporting on those 3 categories of staff. There are a couple others. So SPED coordinators you wouldn't need to include because they are not directly working with students. I think that one's already answered.
Yeah.
There are some questions about how you're dealing with leavers and returners. I'll let Laura answer that part of that.
Yeah, so if the question came in and said that they have a teacher who's part-time social studies and was part-time a special education teacher last year, so that had 2 roles, but currently that teacher only teaches social studies, how should they indicate that? So they're a leaver for their special education role, but they are a returner for their social studies role. And you should indicate the percentage of time, the new percentage of time the person is working now as a social studies teacher.
And then if you do, so if it is...
No, you do not you can't type over...
For FTE they would.
Oh, yeah, you just type in, for FTE you do, type in just over that, but not in that returning status columns, you indicate, the reason. They left and they left the LEA for one role, but they returned for the other.
Yeah, and so if you have someone who had 2 roles last year and only 1 role this year, all of the FTE, the SPED information, the LEP information should all be reflective of what they are currently teaching as of October 5th, 2018 for the 18-19 school year. So if you have someone who left, their FTE should be 0 because their current FTE, or if that person's gone or they're not in that role anymore, the FTE for that role should be 0, and then for the new role, make sure that all of that is updated. So basically what I look at when I'm analyzing this data is if that person has an FTE filled in, I know that they're current staff, and it should say that they're a returner or they're new. And then if I see an FTE of 0, I expect to see that that person left or is no longer employed with your LEA. So yes, you can definitely just type over what was previously there if it's no longer up to date. Thanks for hanging in with us, guys. We know this is a lot of information, but it's also, we want to make sure that you have everything that you need.
So for the certification information, we do need this information completed for all teachers, regardless of the ages of the students that they serve. All paraprofessionals and support staff who work with students with disabilities or English learners, and that could be in a full-time or part-time basis. This section is extremely important specifically for staff members that work with students with disabilities and English learners. I know that there are some, DC exceptions that allow charter schools to hire teaching staff that is not certified, or that allows for you to not check for certification for teaching staff. However, that is not the case for students working with, for staff working with students with disabilities. You should know if a person working with a student with disabilities does have a special education credential or not. If you do not know this information, you should first ask your staff member. We also have a licensure database that we, Shandy and I can look at and confirm information in. I spoke to our licensure, our director of licensure, and he did say that they are working on a system that will allow for LEAs and parents to just look up people and see what their certification is. That system is not currently live at the moment. They are still working on that system. So I have.
And that being said, I want to emphasize too, this is not a compliance piece, this is a reporting piece that goes to the federal government. So don't feel like, oh, I'm a charter LEA, I don't even have to be certified, so I'm not going to fill that information in. That's not, first of all, your teachers do still, at least if you're working with students with disabilities as a teacher, you still have to have a bachelor's degree. That is still the state requirement. But we know a lot of charter LEAs, even though you don't have to, do have certified staff. And so we're just reporting on what percentage of our staff are certified per state requirements, and that's what we report to the Department of Education. So please, if you don't fill this information in, this template will get kicked back to you to fill it in. It does have to be completed. Even if it's a no, again, we're not coming out with compliance. For charters, this is not publicly reported. So definitely be aware that we're just using it to report to the Department of Education.
Yeah, and that goes into that first question there, like why do we even have that? This is all part of new ESSA law, and DC has to report to the federal government in aggregate the percent of out-of-field teachers. That is something that is part of the law that we are mandated to do, so we have to collect it. As this is something that we just don't know. That I think I covered everything else here.
There's a little bit on paraprofessionals. If you have a paraprofessional who works with students with disabilities, they are required to be licensed isn't the right word. They have to have passed the practice exam. So please put that information in as yes. And there's several ways that they can be considered certified, quote unquote. One of them is the practice. So please make sure you're filling in that information if they're working with students with disabilities.
And something very important to note here is that, so if you have questions and you do not know if specific staff members have a certification, or you can either ask them or we can run it for you and we can give you this information. But as I said before, this is extremely important for our reporting to ESSA. In the guidance, I think this section is about 4 to 5 pages of the guidance that specifically states what license a DC staff member could hold for a specific role. So there's a lot of information there. Please review the guidance when you're looking at completing these sections. Not something that we can go line by line on, but if you do have any questions during our office hours, please come by and also just shoot us an email and we can help you. So teaching curriculum and years of experience and leadership information. This section needs to be completed for all teachers and leaders regardless of the ages of the students that they serve. Specifically, this is very important for our state report card, and we went over it at the start of the webinar. The information of years of experience will be public on the individual school's report card in ranges. So having those columns complete is extremely important for the way that parents are going to view this information online. The same for in-field status and in-field of another subject area. That information is not public, but that information is going to be used for equity calculations. So completing those sections with fidelity is important for your LEA. So I have some questions here. What if a teacher teaches more than one subject area? So if a teacher teaches more than one subject area, you just have to report them as a teacher, depending on the grade span, and utilize the federal, the FTE percentage that is appropriate for that specific subject range. So let's say someone teaches math, it's a math teacher, so it's a teacher, and that person teaches K through second grade, those are 3 rows. But if somebody just teaches 9 through 12, that is just 1 row. And we also explained in the guidance and in your spreadsheet specifically what are the subject areas that are allowable, and we can have even more conversations about this offline.
Yeah, I will clarify, if you have someone who's teaching high school math and maybe they teach one section of algebra and one section of calculus, those are separate fields, and so you would still need to repeat that person and put them on multiple lines. That means that if they teach algebra 1 and 2 are lumped into one group here, so if they're teaching, algebra 1 and algebra 2, that's fine. You would just need one line. But do look at the subject areas. It is more expansive this year.
Yeah.
And we know all of your classes may not beautifully fit into those buckets, but choose, if you have a history teacher that you feel like is not fully encompassed, or maybe a sociology teacher or something, choose the one that's the most appropriate if you're not sure. Or reach out, again, like Laura said, if you have questions.
So we decided on making the subject area more expansive this year to actually help teachers of DC when it comes to the shortage and vacancy reporting. So we will be reporting that information back to the federal government and to let them know what areas of DC actually have a greater shortage. And that information is going to help our teachers, as we stated before, with different financial aid programs. So the federal Stafford loan program, the Perkins loan, the teacher education assistance information, all of those federal programs are come from reports that we submit to the federal government. So we can actually help the teachers of DC, save them some money, etc. But going back to this, so how should you report years of experience? You should report years of experience as a whole number. So let's say someone worked all last year, that is a 1. If they're a brand new teacher, please include the number 0. That's important, that they're a new teacher, so that should be very self-explanatory. Please do not leave it blank. If we see blanks, we don't know if it's a 0 or if it's another number. And include everything as of the full year as of October 5th. So if they started teaching last year at some point, but they haven't been a teacher for a full academic year, please include them as 0.
And we did update this value, and this is true for all of our LEAs. We already updated the values that you gave us last year. So if last year you said, Ms. Jones had 2 years of experience, we've already updated your spreadsheet to say now she has 3 years of experience, because we're making the assumption that she did teach for that full academic year last year. If that's not correct, please definitely put in the value that is correct. But every single teacher should have a number of years of experience.
And that, as I stated right before this, is extremely important for you and for your LEA and for the school, because those are going to be public numbers. They will be in a range on the state report card. So our directors of accountability have elected that to be part of the report card. Our state board has voted on it. ESSA requirements require it for all schools and LEAs of the city. So please pay a lot of attention to those columns.
And we did have a question. If someone had years of experience before they came to your LEA, you can include those years of experience. And we know you may not know the full extent to it. Do the best you can based on their resume they give you, or ask the teacher, how many total years of experience do you have? And as a former teacher, I can tell you, everyone knows, like, how many classes of kids have I had? So definitely do include that information, or those years of experience, even if it wasn't at your LEA or in DC.
So for the section of in-field, you determine if someone is in-field if they meet any one of those criteria. If they were effective or highly effective in that subject during the last school year, and you would know that if that is a returning staff member. If they have a degree in the field related to the subject that they are teaching. And the example here is if it's a high school social studies teacher and they have a BA in history, they are considered in field. And also if they have a license or certification in that subject that they are teaching. When it comes to that area of if you have a degree in the field that you are teaching, you LEAs know best what areas right now are in that subject. So if someone is a social studies teacher in history, if they have an elementary school degree and they're teaching elementary, those are very clear areas. If you have a question, if you need support, please reach out to me, and I could definitely still help you determine if someone is in field when it comes to determining if they're in field based on the subject and their degree. We can work through that together. There is no specific guidance on what degrees go with specific subjects. It is up to the LEA, and I can help you with determining that.
Nada, can you go back 2 slides?
2?
Yeah, there you go. So there are a couple other fields in here. One of them is a novice teacher field, I believe. And so in that, I want to clarify that this is a field you haven't seen before. The novice teacher per state definition is someone in their first year of teaching or someone with 1 year experience who was not rated as effective or higher in the previous year. So we definitely, that is something we have to report on for ESSA as well. And so please make sure you're filling that in. Of course, if I see a 0 for years of experience, I'll know that person's novice. I don't have any other way of knowing if the person's a novice teacher if, you know, maybe they taught half a year last year and had an effectiveness rating of less than effective, or even if they taught half a year last year, they would still be a 0 anyway. So please make sure you fill that in. There's also information on the emergency or provisional certification. In DC, we don't have an emergency credential, but we have, it's there.
Initial.
Yeah, it's an initial certification. So basically, if you have someone who is certified, but it's an initial certification, please note that that is the case. And then, let me just move this over so I can see it a little bit better. Principal experience, that would just be, Laura, can you clarify, is that for principals or like assistant principals as well?
So that is anyone the LEA determines to be a school leader.
Okay. That clarifies that. And then the position offer date, the LEA start date and position offer date, please put that in as well, because that helps us see how long they've been working with your LEA to verify those years of teaching experience in some cases. So, yeah, thanks. All right, so the education and preparation section, this should be completed for all teachers, regardless of what ages of students or the curriculum that they're teaching. It should also be included for paraprofessionals and support staff who work with students with disabilities. And this is because for some of those positions, you are, by state definition, considered licensed or certified if you have a certain type of degree. So there are a couple of fields here. We condensed multiple columns last year. Last year we asked for an associate's and bachelor's and master's and PhD. And what we really just need to know is what the highest level of education is that you have. So we have, at least for non-staffing data collaborative folks, we've already condensed that down based on what you gave us last year. Definitely update it if it's not correct, fill it in if it's not completed, so that we can see what is the highest level of education that your teachers, paras, and support staff have. We also ask for the teacher preparation program if you have it, whether that's a TNTP or Teach for America or Howard University. You know, most of our teachers come from colleges, so putting in if they did a teacher preparation program specifically, what program that was, and that allows us to be able to go back to some of those programs that are local and work with them and make sure that they are producing the teachers that we're needing. So that one's pretty self-explanatory. If they have multiple degrees, you can put a slash and put in the other field that their major was in, or if they have 2 degrees, you can put 2 degree years. So just, yeah, putting it in that way. So yeah, just the highest level of education attained, and that should be pretty self-explanatory there.
See if there are any questions.
Questions not pertaining to that.
No, and I think we're covered.
Yeah.
So performance ratings. This is new for non-staffing data collaborative members. Non-staffing data collaborative members have been giving performance ratings to the research vendor. This section needs to be completed for all teachers and school administrators and principals employed during the last school year. So what we will be doing here is determining if someone is effective or not for equity calculations. For staffing data collaborative members, and this is very, very important for you guys to hear, OSSI will not receive teacher level effectiveness ratings. Per the MOA that we have with Staffing Data Collaborative, we will only be receiving aggregate counts for effective and below effectiveness ratings. What does that look like? So let's say we have ABC charter school. Our research vendor will let us know the count of how many teachers are at that below effectiveness rating, but they will not let us know if Ms. Smith was found to be ineffective. Please let me know if there are any questions for that.
Can you go back once? I wanted to talk for a second about the non-staffing data collaborative on that. We are only collecting that first column for non-staffing collaborative members. So it's just saying this person was effective or higher or was not effective last year. And again, that's because we do have to report on that for equity calculations and determinations. But it's only for non-staffing collaborative members, it's only the first column. You don't have to give us, and we don't even ask for, like, this column doesn't exist in your template. We will not ask for the specific rating. We also don't publish this anywhere, so even though you are providing it to us on a teacher level basis, so we will have that data for non-staffing collaborative members. We are not publishing that. That is not public information. It gets rolled up at the school level and at the LEA level to provide only to you for those equity calculations.
So for staffing data collaborative members, for the folks that are on the line, we did have a collection in June, maybe it ended in August or September, where we asked effectiveness ratings. Those ratings were given directly to our research vendor, TNTP. Obviously, I do not receive your teacher ratings. So you will receive back, or you received back your spreadsheet that includes that second column that says 17-18 school year evaluation ratings. And those ratings are based on the information that you gave in the summer. You have the opportunity right now to make any edits to those ratings if you found that you wrote something down, or you did something that you gave the rating incorrectly for a staff member. You will have the opportunity to make that edit. As far as the information that OSSI receives, we will only receive aggregate counts of the ratings. So we will only see if in ABC charter schools, five out of your 20 teachers were rated below effective. I hope that clarifies that last question.
Yeah, and I want to clarify too, because this is kind of a new thing for non-staffing collaborative members. This is why it is really important that you leave people on your spreadsheet who left at the end of last year, but who still had effectiveness ratings. So your teachers, your leaders, whoever you determine are your school leaders. Because for us, we still have to go back to that 17-18 data and determine what percentage of people in your school, of teachers in your school, were determined to be effective or higher, or not, or below effective. And so it's really important that even if someone didn't return to your school this year, you note that they were a leaver, you give us that effectiveness rating from last year, because we are still working with that 17-18 data moving forward. So we will come back to you if you don't provide that information to us. We will be coming back to you and hounding you to get that information on the template. So it's just easier to submit it all the first time and make sure everything's complete the first time.
So everyone will receive, the presentation will be public on our website, as well as the recording of this presentation. It will be on the website.
Laura, do you have guidance around how they determine effectiveness rating?
So we will accept the ratings that are established by your LEA. We do not at OSSI mandate that you have to use a certain evaluation system, but inside the guidance, you will see how to consolidate the evaluation ratings and how to determine if someone is below effective or not. So simply is anyone rated below effective. So some LEAs have 4 or 5 different ratings, and some are minimally effective, ineffective. You would consolidate those 2 ratings to say below effective. So even in that case, non-staffing data collaborative members, we will not know the specific rating of a teacher if you're consolidating and merging different ratings. So yes, you should not, you did hear that correct. You should not delete anyone from your spreadsheet. You should add, determine if they're leavers, and you could delete their FTE and note them as 0, so we know that this person is actually not working part or full-time at your LEA or school. The last section is very quick, and that is compensation. So compensation is only for Staffing Data Collaborative, and OSSI and I do not receive this information at all. This information is used for analysis only from our research vendor that analyzes compensation trends and gives that information back to Staffing Data Collaborative members. As you know, for the Staffing Data Collaborative, you not only receive reports on what you give, but you also receive reports comparing you to the citywide trend. So for this specific section, our research vendor utilizes it to determine, what are compensation trends in the city, and how does your LEA or school compare to those trends. And we do know that there are some LEAs that pay more and less than others, but there are other indicators, and as the reports from our research vendor state, there are other levers and, folks come and go for other reasons different from compensation. So this area is just helping with that report. This is not a requirement for non-staffing data collaborative members, and if you are a part of the collaborative and you do not feel comfortable giving this information, we could also talk, as it is something that we're only using to give you a report back. So if you do not give it, you won't get a report that specifically talks about compensation or how you compare in the city. And yeah, so does individual salary get reported to OSSI? No.
So we are offering in-person office hours. We are literally just going to go sit in a room for 6 hours on October 12th. That's a Wednesday from 9 to 3. With Laura and myself, we are happy to help you with anything. If you'd like to come in, if you want to call in, you're welcome to do that as well. Sometimes it's easier to just come sit in person and hash through questions you may have. So feel free to take advantage of those office hours. You don't need to RSVP or anything like that. Just show up, tell the front desk that you're here for room 523, and you can come on up and we will help you work through any questions you may have. You can also reach out at any time via phone, via email, to Laura if you're in the Staffing Data Collaborative. She's more able to answer your questions specifically around that. And if you're not in the Staffing Data Collaborative, please contact myself, and my phone number and email address is right there. We are happy to answer your emails and phone calls at any time if those office hours don't work for you. Yeah, feel free to reach out. And I mean, even if maybe the office hours don't work for you, but you need to set up an appointment to come in and, talk for 15, 20 minutes about what you need, we can definitely set up that as well.
So I did get some questions before we wrap it all up. So you will receive the information that you gave last year, and that also includes compensation. So you do not need to retype that. You just need to update it if needed. You're welcome. And yes, October 12th is a Friday.
Hold on. It's on my calendar for Thursday 11th, what's our date? Make sure we tell people correctly.
Oh, no. So Oh, yeah, so it is actually the 11th. This is incorrect.
So we're wrong on both fronts. It's Thursday, October 11th. Sorry about that, folks. So we will make sure and send you the correct information and time and update this slide so it doesn't perpetuate. But it is Thursday, October 11th from 9 to 3 in room 523. The time and the place are correct. The date is not. So thank you for flagging that for us. It is Thursday, October 11th. So there was a question, how's the new template implemented to the old spreadsheet? Basically, we take your data that you gave us last year, we export it into the new template. So any of the fields that were in last year's template and that you filled out, we will basically spit back out to you. So, things like teacher experience or the curriculum taught, a lot of teachers do continue in the same, and staff continue in the same positions as they do in the past. And so we try to prevent having extra work on you that doesn't need to be done. And so we take whatever data you gave to us last year and we put it back into the new template in the correct columns, asking you to fill out the columns that have been added or that maybe you didn't fill in all of the data last year. I will also flag for non-staffing collaborative folks, the template that you will receive. If it's a field that has to be filled out, it will be highlighted. So when we get that template back, or you want to do a check on your own first before you send it to us, which would be much appreciated, make sure if it's a highlighted field, it should be filled in. And so it will be highlighted, like if you say this person's a teacher, it's going to highlight all the fields that you have to fill out for a teacher, whereas you can easily see, if you fill in that someone is a support staff and they do after school care, those teacher lines are not, or the teacher columns are not going to line up. And so
then there's another question. Yes, we do see that there is a tight deadline for non-staffing data collaborative members. You will receive your information back on October 8th, and we do have the office hours on October 11th. However, if you would like to come to the office hours on the 11th, please feel free. We are also available to answer any and all questions you have between now and the time that your submission is due. So don't feel that, October 11th is the day that you have to have everything completed by. If you are not part of the collaborative and you just want to reach out to me, please feel free. I mean, I also work here at OSSI, so I can help you and answer any questions that you might have also. So don't feel like the 11th is the day that you actually have to have everything complete. And we can set up some other time to help also. So for folks that have questions about the collaborative, please shoot me an email. We can schedule some time to talk about how to join or what the difference is. We did review it a little bit during our the beginning of the webinar, but I can and will go over it again. Just shoot me an email.
Yep, so that concludes our presentation for today. This will be sent out to you, both the slides with the corrected date on it, as well as the webinar has been recording, and so you'll be able to access that if you want to come back to these questions. Our email and contact information, of course, is there. You can reach out to Laura or myself at any time. We're happy to answer your questions there as well. And then, yeah, we are happy to be a support to you. Please do be aware of the deadline that you have, because we have a really tight turnaround on getting that data to the Department of Education. The deadline for Staffing Collaborative is October 31st, and the deadline for non-staffing collaborative is November 16th.
So Staffing Data Collaborative members received their data on September 24th. That is not obviously the date of the submission or the deadline.
Yeah, so you have about both groups have about 6 weeks to complete that data. Please do not wait till the last minute, as we know that questions arise. It's kind of complicated data, but we also use it for a lot of reports, so it's really important to our students to and for our federal reporting obligations that data is as accurate as possible and submitted in a timely fashion. So we'll wrap this up. We'll stay on the line for a minute or two. If you have questions that you want to type into the boxes, we can answer those. But thank you so much for your time. We very much so appreciate your time, both for listening today and for your attention to detail as you fill out this template as well. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you. Please let us know if you have any other questions. So So deadlines are October 31st for not for Staffing Data Collaborative and November 16th for non-staffing data collaborative. Let me see which questions are unanswered.
I think it was the one, so the spreadsheet did not have compensation from last year. Was that included in?
So let's chat about that offline. I'll have to talk to our research vendor. Remember, I do not see your compensation information, so I cannot put it in for you. But we can talk to the research vendor to ensure that the compensation is in there from last year for your LEA. And you would just have to update the numbers, because I do assume that some compensation has changed from last year to this year, hopefully. No, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Make sure it goes out.
Just waiting for more people to sign off.
Did you stop the recording? Down a bit.